Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good day, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the Black Belt Academy of Surgical Skills. My name is David O'Regan. I'm a cardiac surgeon in Yorkshire in the United Kingdom. I'm the director of the Faculty of Surgical Trainers for the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh, and I'm a visiting professor at Imperial College. Thank you to the 3,041 followers of the Black Belt Academy of Surgical Skills from across the globe. And if you're joining this evening, thank you very much indeed. I reflect in our karate classes, we have Nore, Ray, where the sensei and the students bow to each other out of respect. So I say to you, Nore and Ray, as respect to you as followers. Thank you too for the 2,300 likes. If this is your first time for the Black Belt Academy of Surgical Skills, welcome, and I very much appreciate you being here with me. The whole philosophy of the Black Belt Academy is built on the philosophy of martial arts. And as I mentioned last week, many surgeons in Japan come from a long lineage of samurai warriors. And this is the Book of Five Rings, a classic text on the Japanese way of the sword, written by Miyamoto Musashi, a samurai warrior of about 1643. With the science of martial arts, and just substitute martial arts with surgery, of my individual school outlined above, by diligent practice, day and night, the mind is naturally broadened, transmitting it to the world as both collective and an individual military surgical science. And he writes it down for the first time in these 5 scrolls, but outlines some important rules. And these rules, I believe, apply to surgery in general. Think of what is right and true. Practice and cultivate the science. Become acquainted with the arts. Know the principles of the crafts. Understand the harm and benefit in everything. Learn to see everything accurately. Become aware of what is not obvious. Be careful even in the small matters, and do not do anything useless. To me, those rules apply very aptly to surgery, and generally speaking, the science of martial arts should be practiced with such principles in mind. In this particular science, you can hardly become a master of martial arts unless you can see the immediate in a broad context. Once you've learnt the principle, you should not be defeated even in individual combat against 20 or 30 opponents. But first of all, keep martial arts in mind and work diligently in a straightforward manner, and then you can win with your hands. Furthermore, when you refine your practice to the point where you attain freedom of the whole body, then you can overcome people by means of your body. And since your mind is trained in the science, you can also overcome people by means of your mind. And that is it. The practice of martial arts is a molding of both the mind and the action. And that's why it becomes a journey of mastery. And I'm delighted to say, my son, you've seen, helping me in my assisting videos, got his 3rd dan in karate last Sunday. And for those of you who have noticed, I've got a green stripe, meaning that I'm 2/3 of my way to my 3rd dan in karate, which I hope to do in September next year. But the thing about karate and thinking about practicing and improving all the time goes back to a fundamental educational philosophy described by Carol Dweck of the growth mindset. You have to be prepared to grow, practice, learn from your mistakes, and grow again. But we do not encourage you to practice on patients, and with respect, many of you have not had the opportunity to be in theatre during the COVID period and probably lamenting the fact that you have not had practical skills. This is where the Black Belt Academy comes in, because we'd like to encourage you to practice basic skills and hone them, literally in the comfort of your own homes. And that is the principle. So this evening we're talking about separation. And most of what we do as surgeons is separate tissues. And we can separate tissues because they're biologically, the way they fold, infold, and angiogenesis, we create layers, layers upon layers upon layers. And in essence, surgery is defining those layers and opening those layers to reveal the tissues underneath. To do so, you must have an appreciation of the feel of the tissues, and the feel can only come through an appreciation of holding the instrument correctly. And last week, I drew my katana, and there's a particular way to hold it. The same with golf, with cricket, with tennis, etc. You're taught to hold the instrument correctly. And I think that during the years of my training, not many people taught me how to hold the instrument correctly. So I'm going to take you to the overhead cam. We've got a new camera, as you have seen. Thank you to Kevin of Wet Lab and Edwards Life Sciences that enables us to zoom in, zoom out, and I hope you enjoy the experience. Remember, I want to see examples from you, and I thank Vlad and Harris and Sura and others who have sent me wonderful pictures of their practice, and I'm putting them up on the website. So let's go overhead, and I'm going to take this overhead. It's a fantastic camera. So let's first of all look at the scissors. Now these are McIndoe scissors, and we've described who Archibald McIndoe was before, and we did so because if you knew what he did, you would respect the instrument by picking them up properly. You'll note that there's a curve in the scissors, and this curve has to be aligned with the curve of the wrist, because what we're doing is actually gathering tissues. It also means that as I'm looking down the scissors, I can see the belly and I can see the tips. If I have it this way up, like a spoon, not only am I dissing McIndoe, but when I'm dissecting in solid organs, I may be focusing on the point, but missing the belly. And I've actually seen this happen in lung surgery and the belly cut the pulmonary artery with quite dramatic effects. So as I hold it, the alignment of the scissors is with the curve of the wrist and the curve of the belly. And as Linda de Cossard, a colleague, pointed out to me, I was taught to put it in my ring finger. And note that my fingers, again, do not go through the rings, but the instrument is held lightly on the palps of the fingers, because that's where your myxinal corpuscles and your Merkel cells are to give you the feel. My middle finger is resting on that arrangement, and my index finger is extended down the shaft to give me direction, further proprioception as well. Now the important thing about scissors for separating tissues, the blunt end of the scissors are rather nice, but even though they're blunt, they can stab the tissue. So what can we use at home to practice? It's very simply anything you like out of the fridge. So I've got here a tangerine, and I'm using my forceps to hold the tissue and stabilize the tissue. I'll just come down and focus a little bit further onto this to give you a better view. I'm holding the tissue away, and I'm using the point of the scissors to develop the plane. I'm opening up the plane, and I take the scissors out before I close. Because if I close within and out of sight, the potential is that I can potentially cut and destroy things. So I'm opening it up and developing the plane, effectively using the plane to separate the tissues. I did try this on a stand earlier, but it didn't quite work, so I'll try it again, because it was rolling around the plate. There you go. So I'm finding the plane and developing the plane all the time. And this requires patience. And the patience is a state of mind. And that is where the philosophy comes in. And you can see this is a rather easy model, but it's a good one for you to start practicing on and developing the plane, and doing so gently without cutting the fruit underneath. And this is not too dissimilar to removing the cortex from an infected organ or cutting adhesions in the abdomen. And what you're testing is the feel of the tissues. When you've got clean sight, of course, you can cut without worry. And there you go. So we've exposed one segment of this orange already, and not unlike solid tissues, liver, lung, or any other tissues where they're divided into segments. And remember, the segmental division of tissues is really down to the division of the vessels, and therefore the vessels define the anatomy. And if you follow the vessels and get into the plane of the vessels, you will find an easy way to dissect out. So I'm doing this for the first time for you because I do feel many of the basic skills are perhaps staged, and you think to yourself, oh, it's staged, it's not so, that's easy. I'm doing this live, and I had a go earlier on in the week, but I'm not making this up. And what I wanted to do is demonstrate to you that gently opening my scissors, I am actually developing the plane. And this is how many of the tissues appear. I can come round and work at different angles, but again, and the important thing is that I'm gentle, I'm feeling the tension in the tissues as they're opening it up. And what I don't want to do is remove this and destroy the tissue itself and destroy it. And if I do, I will get a lot of juice, and that will give me feedback that I'm doing it wrong. So can I dissect out the segment of tissue? Now, we're going to come to the forceps in our lesson next week, and I'll describe it in more detail. But this is actually quite a nice exercise in dissecting out a segment of orange. And note that if I was too clumsy with my forceps, I'm squeezing the juice out and destroying the forceps, destroying the tissues. I'll come to that next week. But of course, there's another way of practicing. That was relatively straightforward because it was a tangerine. Something that's a little bit more challenging, perhaps, is something like a grapefruit. And a grapefruit, and as I'm doing this, I'm thinking of the years of doing cortex dissection and removing of tissues. And note that I'm feeling the tissues as I go. And if there's resistance and I can see it, I'm cutting it. Because the most important thing about adhesions and inflammatory adhesions between tissue planes, they're usually stronger than the tissue itself. So, as a dissection tool, I would be very careful with my scissors, because I can either stick it in the tissue, or if I'm too vigorous with opening my scissors, I will destroy the grapefruit underneath. Now, although I've got the rind off, so to speak, you can see here that there's another more challenging layer to try and take off. It's the pith. And do you think I can actually develop this plane with my scissors? Well, let's have a go, shall we? I'm just taking this off. And this is just giving you the skills that you require for dissection. You see, I'm not putting any effort in. I'm just insinuating my scissors in gently, and the curve of the scissors is actually meeting the curve of the grapefruit as well. Opening it up, and I can cut it off. This is more challenging layer, the one that's more adherent to the soft, fleshy tissue underneath. This is not unlike doing a pericardectomy with a heart and epicardium. And if you're in the wrong layer, it is very easy to start stripping off the coronary vessels themselves. So as a dissection practice, you yourself, I hope, will enjoy time practicing and doing this. And there you have it. It is actually wonderful. And as I'm doing this, I have to be mindful of the time I have with you, because I suddenly find myself, to be honest, becoming immersed in the process and actually enjoying the feel, enjoying the practice. So though we have used citrus fruits in this instance, what does it mean in real practice? So if I take now that bit of pork belly, and you'll be pleased to hear that in the Black Belt Academy, I'm very mindful of recycling things. So this is the underside of the pork belly. You can see I've used it on the previous occasion for incisions and stitching, but the underside of the pork belly is very useful for practice as well. Unfortunately in the UK, that bit of pork belly is 15 quid, but I think you can get most of the practice you need with a citrus fruit and varying degrees of difficulty. But you can see here that everything is organized in layers. So start where you want. Again, use your scissors to insinuate into the layer and develop the layers and develop the tissue planes. And that's using your scissors when in situations like this enables you to develop the planes and the tissues. Sometimes it's very difficult to find them, and what you need to do is work along a broad surface. Don't focus on going deep in one particular area. Develop planes across a number of different areas. So you're working across a broad surface. Now remember, in anatomy, vessels and nerves cross tissue planes. And in doing so, what you need to decide in dissecting is that a nerve, for example? Is that a nerve, or is that just fat? And you can only do so by feel. And usually, nerves and vessels are a lot more solid. Note that I'm not opening the scissors any more than necessary to do the job. But in this situation, I can open the scissors up a little bit. I can literally just scrape the tissue off and scrape it away. See that? Open it up and scrape it, a bit like cutting Christmas wrapping paper or any other wrapping paper. Now, I perceive as I'm dissecting this, there's a little degree of resistance just here. And I can only perceive it because I'm holding the instrument lightly. But as I get closer and remove the fat, and you can see if I put my scissors behind, and I'll take the magnification further, so you can see, and this is the essence of dissection, is my scissors I can pass behind, and you can see immediately a translucent area, which is just fat, but I can tease that away. But underneath that was this cord-like structure here, and that is a vessel, and I can see it's pink. I might be able to diathermy it, but if it's a vein, it doesn't diathermy, and I'd ligate that. And remember, around the exocrine organs of the body, there are numerous veins in various anatomical positions because their function is to take the hormones from the exocrine organ into the body. And there you go, a vessel. Forgive me to cutting that, or diatherming that, or ligated. But as you can see, as we develop this plane, I'm using my scissors to separate. I'm separating and developing the planes. And what's great about tissue planes in general, as I said, they're bloodless except for around exocrine organs, thyroid, pancreas, and adrenal organs in particular. And again, as I'm dissecting there at this point, it's focused down so much now. What a beautiful camera this is. At this point here, as I take my scissors in, I can feel a little resistance. And again, there's another little band that I can put my scissors round. And if you look at that, and I'll focus again on that, coming down a bit further. Wow. There you go. I can put my scissors behind it, and you can see, is that translucent or is there a cord-like structure in it? And there is a cord-like structure in it. And really, if we're going to ligate vessels, we should identify the vessel itself without tissues around. And there you go, it's another tissue. So the separation of tissues comes from how you hold your scissors and dissect out. Now, if I'm working down a limited area, I can certainly develop this over a broad plane and it works rather well. However, if I'm working over a broader area and developing a plane, I would use a knife. Now previously I said you use a knife by holding it in the palm. The sagittal plane is maintained between your thumb and your middle finger, with your index finger again extended down for proprioception direction. But when it comes to using your knife to develop a plane, I take the handle out of my palm a little bit, and I use a knife now like a brush. And when I say like a brush, I literally do mean like a brush. I'm going to brush my knife with my blade against the surface I'm dissecting away. And by doing so, and stroking the blade along that surface, I am now able to effect. Good. So I'm exaggerating the movement here, but you can see literally by brushing my knife against the tissue, I'm making outstanding progress in separating the one layer from another. And then my blade is flush with that layer, and I'm literally, I hope you appreciate doing that. And that's what I love about the 22 blade. It's a large blade where you use the belly, as I described last week, and in a very little time, literally using brush strokes, I am able to develop a wide plane. I'll bring that further into view. There you go. See that movement? I'm literally brushing against, and I'm holding it further out. But note that the palp of my index finger and my thumb are holding the blade so I can feel its action all the way through. Now, I really enjoy dissection, and as a cardiac surgeon, I don't often get the chance to dissect because we do mainly stitching. But the dissection element of surgery, I absolutely love. And if I'm not careful, I can find myself getting totally immersed in this procedure, developing the planes. I hope I've convinced you. This is a lovely way of developing large planes. Just as an aside, when you have a large plane like that, in the healing process, unless you bring the two layers together properly, that is a potential exudate space for collection of tissue. And therefore, you may consider to reduce that potential of exudate collecting in a space which is high protein, sitting in a 37.6 degrees, is a beautiful petri dish for bugs, and that is where you would use a drain. I hope that we have explained to you this evening some of the principles that apply to separating the tissues. And I don't think feel can be underestimated in this. And I think about my years of surgical practice, nobody taught me feel. And it brings me back to that martial arts principles. Become aware of what's not obvious. Be careful even in small matters. And be careful in feel. Thank you very much indeed for joining the Black Belt Academy of Surgical Skills. I look forward to seeing you next week, where we're going to pick up the story on the forceps. And as I've alluded to this evening, the forceps are very important in the process of triangulation. That is the theme of next week's lesson. I hope you can join me then. Please spread the word, invite other people to follow, and again, please send me pictures of what you're doing. Norre and Ray, thank you.